Hello, the webinar is now live, and I think I should be here rather than you, Jeremy, but never mind. Welcome to all of you people who understand that money makes the world go round and who are interested in finding ways to make your money work better, to make the world a better place. A very warm welcome to our speakers. Kenneth Green is going to kick off. He's from Make My Money Matter, a campaigning group on pensions, and he has a special interest in deforestation, so I'm sure you're going to get questions about that. And also Claudia Quiroz, who is a sustainable investment manager of many years' experience. And Jeremy Duke, who you can see on your screen, is going to be fielding the questions and giving some himself, a long-time local Primrose Hill resident, financial advisor, who I originally met when we were both involved in something to do with the Primrose Hill Art Trail, and got into a discussion back in August, and he then advertised in our magazine On the Hill, and then I asked him if he'd do this, so it's been a long process. Before we start, just a few words about our community association, Primrose Hill Community Association. This talk is part of a series which we've been doing during lockdown, well, since September. It's called A View from the Hill, and at the moment we're doing every 2 weeks. And we offer them free, but of course, COVID has drastically reduced the community association's income. So donations are very welcome. There'll be a donate button. We'll give the donate link in the chat, and there's a donate button on our website. So we are recording this talk, but as we're in a webinar, the participants won't be visible. But please put your questions in the Q&A, and there's also chat, but if you put your questions in the Q&A, and you can also vote them up, I think, so that if you see a question that someone else has asked that you're interested in, you can vote for it. And we'll have time, we'll give time at the end for people to ask questions. Great, I don't think there's anything else, so I'm handing over, and it's over to Kenneth to start. Thank you.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. So my name's Kenneth. I'm from an organisation called Make My Money Matter. So we're a relatively new organisation. We're set up about a year and a half ago by Richard Curtis, who's the director of Love Actually, For Weddings and a Funeral, Blackadder, things like that. And basically our organisation is really keen to try and help people align their finances with their values. A lot of people don't understand their pensions are invested in lots of things that they maybe wouldn't support. So really it's basically like a hidden superpower. So we're really keen to raise awareness about this and make people understand exactly what their pensions are doing. I have a short video to show, which, let's cross fingers the tech will work. There we go. Cool. So it's just a kind of a funny video that kind of basically explains a tiny bit about our work, the power your pensions have, but also shows a bit of the kind of tongue-in-cheek aspect our organisation tries to use. So here we go.
If we aren't careful, things will unravel fast. Huge changes in geography could put huge pressures on humanity. It all comes down to money. If all our money was invested with an eye on right and wrong, we could stop everything unraveling. Protect ourselves from the ravages of climate change. We could end extreme poverty. We could fix our world before we get wiped out. If you have a bank account or a pension, you're powerful. You can make your money matter. You can make the people who look after your money invest it sustainably, in fact actually help the planet and all of us who live on it. Google Make My Money Matter. It's incredibly important. Yeah, a little help here, please.
So that was Martin Freeman of kind of Lord of the Rings and various other kind of fame. So yeah, he's a fantastic partner of ours. He's a big supporter, and it kind of shows you the kind of humour we try to bring to the subject, because obviously pensions can be really pretty boring often. People maybe think of pensions kind of years after they kind of years, like 2 years or something before they actually start withdrawing it, or they kind of realize, oh wow, I need to actually look into my pensions. So yes, we're really keen to kind of make sure people are aware of them. So this is just a kind of a quick kind of slide, just kind of showing a tiny bit about pensions. And one of the things organizations really kind of support of is making sure people understand your pensions are actually a choice. The money that you have in your pensions is basically, it's up to you what you spend it on. So right now, a lot of people are cutting down on flying, reducing their plastic waste, getting electric cars, which is absolutely fantastic. And these are really kind of good modern day ways of helping save the planet. Things that might not have been considered years ago are now actually coming into the fore. Who'd have thought that kind of like glitter, for instance, would be seen as this actually, people need to reduce the glitter they're using because of microplastics in the oceans. Obviously, these things were kind of understood a few years ago, but weren't necessarily kind of recognised as being huge issues. But there's another thing that's still a huge issue that people haven't quite cottoned on to, and that is the fact that people's pensions are investing in products. So if you've got money sitting in a pension or money sitting in a bank account, it might just be kind of sitting there gathering a small amount of interest, but actually it's invested in something. The pension fund or the bank that you've given that money to is using that to invest in things like kind of fossil fuels and factory farms. We've heard of cancer survivors who are investing in tobacco, environmentalists who are investing in drilling for oil. So these are kind of huge issues, and people, when they realise this, are shocked because they might have taken all those individual steps I've mentioned earlier, but not actually taken one big step about looking where their money is actually going. Another thing about pensions is it's absolutely giant amount of money. So it's £3 trillion in the UK pensions, which is absolutely like giant. It's about enough to fund the NHS for about 25 years. So yeah, just giant amounts. And obviously we had the budget today and they're talking kind of about £1 billion here, £1 billion there. Well, pensions are worth 3 trillion. So it's an absolutely huge amount of money. Second of all, there's always these kind of big events and big things that are happening at the moment in the world that money is tight or people are trying to find money for. So we've got the Paris kind of agreement that's 10 years old, the big climate change agreement, and the new kind of like pact is being negotiated in Glasgow in November. Climate finance is on the agenda, but we're not sure where the money is going to come from. The politicians are debating and arguing about who pays for the tab of all of the fossil fuels that we've been burning over the years. But pensions could potentially play a huge role in that. And we've also got things like the G7. So the UK is co-hosting this big international meeting in Cornwall in June, where they'll discuss how the world can build back better from COVID. Again, pensions are a huge untapped investment that is really kind of an interesting, exciting concept. But to kind of go back to the more kind of like personal element, it's really just important to think about where your pension is invested. And it's actually a bit easier than you think as well. So basically, it is your money, first of all. That is always the important thing to say. So if you are working or if you have a kind of the kind of workplace pension, or even if you've got a kind of a private pension, you will have somebody you can speak to about that, just to find out, basically ask what your pension is it doing? Is it kind of invested in an ethical fund? Is it invested in a kind of fund that no one really knows, but probably oil, probably tobacco, maybe some nuclear in there as well? It's always worth asking these questions and just making sure your fund manager or your kind of workplace pension kind of provider is aware that you care. One thing that we've found is that most pension providers get a bit confused when people actually show an interest in these things or care about these things, just because they're not used to people actually asking the question. But we've seen some great successes over the last kind of year or so about organisations and pensions moving towards a more kind of environmentally friendly green aspect. So just to kind of maybe a few other things about the kind of work my organisation does. So here's a few kind of like screenshots of luminaries that we've been able to work with. Again, kind of Richard Curtis, who's our co-founder, has a great phone book, which has been very exciting, almost kind of like pick a few celebrities that we'd like to be involved with. So that's Chris Hemsworth at the top, also known as Thor. Doesn't always have a red square on his face, but yes, he did on that occasion. And Ashton B, the comedian and writer and director and actor, who's a fantastic kind of supporter as well. And you've also got Jason Isaacs, who very kindly wielded an axe for us for our kind of like Christmas campaign about deforestation. And a few maybe other things about the kind of like work that we do. We're basically we've got a big public campaign to make people understand and aware of what their pension's doing. As I say, most people think it kind of just sits in a bank and doesn't really do much, but it is actually having a huge impact. Another thing we do is looking at corporate partners. So if you kind of work for a business or work for an organization, as I said, chances are you'll have a pension through them, through the kind of auto enrollment scheme the government introduced a few years ago. We're basically working with a lot of organizations in the UK to make them engage their employees about what their pension is doing, but also to kind of look at their if their pension matches up with their values. There's organizations such as like Ben & Jerry's or someone like that who are really good on the kind of ethical front, but maybe actually haven't looked about what their pensions are doing. So it's something we're keen to make sure people understand, that their pension matches up with their company values. And we're also working with government and industry. And we recognise that pensions is quite a topic that not a lot of people are talking about, and because of that, it's a lot of work to get the millions needed almost to understand the issues about pensions. So we're really keen to try to work with pension funds to convince them to change the default fund into a more environmentally friendly one. So that fund you automatically go into without changing. We're keen to try to move that towards a more environmentally friendly one. So since launching last year, we've had about 20 million people's pensions have been moved into that default fund, which is a more environmentally friendly one, which is fantastic. And there's also about £340 billion of people's pensions that has been committed to net zero, which basically means it's more environmentally friendly. In the years to come, that pension will emit no carbon or net zero carbon, rather than just the lots of carbon it might have been if it was an oil. It's funny, I've worked for a few organizations, and as I said, the billion here, billion there is it's just fascinating to work for an organization that £340 billion has been moved, and it's still we've got a way to go on that as well. But I think it is really important that people just understand exactly, you have power. If you've got a pension, if you have money, you have power over this. You have the ability to talk to your pension provider, to talk to your friends, talk to your family, and just raise a bit more awareness about it, and then ask your pension provider to take that step to move your pension, or ideally everyone's pension they own, towards a more environmentally friendly net zero one. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to always get in touch with me or our organisation. I'm pretty sure I've bored most of my family and friends with pension conversations, so it's always nice to actually have someone else to talk to about it. And I'm also just going to share, finally, I've got a wee video from David Attenborough, who also cares about these things, which is quite nice. And this is from WWF, and Netflix had a film called A Life on Our Planet. So it's available on Netflix. You can watch the whole thing, but this is just a wee excerpt.
The living world is essentially solar powered. The Earth's plants capture 3 trillion kilowatt hours of solar energy each day. That's almost 20 times the energy we need just from sunlight. Imagine if we phased out fossil fuels and ran our world on the eternal energies of nature too. Sunlight, wind, water, and geothermal. It's crazy that our banks and our pensions are investing in fossil fuel, when these are the very things that are jeopardizing the future that we're saving for.
Great.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I think we're going to move straight on to Claudia's presentation and then have questions afterwards, if that's all right. But I've certainly got some questions which I want to put in, so that'll be good. So Claudia, are you okay to start?
I am. Thank you so very much. Let me move my screen so I can see what I'm doing here. So good evening to everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's is really exciting, and many of the things that Kenneth just mentioned, they resonated with me. I think that he said many times, it's your money, and you have the power to change it. You have the power to give the direction of where you want your money to be invested. And that has been, in a way, the underpinning of 20 years of me being involved in sustainable investing, telling to clients that it's possible to invest in the things that they want to invest in and to avoid the things that they don't want to invest in. And in a way, that is all it matters, investing for the future, investing for the planet that we want to have, investing for a better world that we all want to live in, and we want our children and our grandchildren to inherit. So I have several slides, and it's all about understanding how we can invest our pension for the brighter, better future that we all want. And the first slide is just a reminder that none of the things that I'm going to mention, they are financial advice, and it's just because I'm an investment manager, but in principle, I won't be making any recommendations. This is a safekeeping. My compliance team is very happy after that slide. So, sustainable investing for this better, greener, low carbon economy world where we can reduce social and environmental inequality. Is very much in the growing out there. People are very much aware of the issues, and there are many drivers of this change or this understanding of sustainable investing. I have highlighted here 3 of those that I think that are quite important. And Kenneth also mentioned David Attenborough, and interesting enough, every time that he has one of the programs for all of us to understand the impacts of plastic in the oceans, how we can change the world by investing in renewable energy, and actually about wildlife and so on, we see an incredible interest from clients, and we see people awareness asking how we can make sure that we can invest our monies in a way that they are favoring and these values. So he has made a remarkable contribution to sustainable investing. I don't think that he intended that, but he has made a remarkable contribution. Also, there is an incredible market growth, and it's driven by regulation in principle, because ESG, environmental, social and governance, is something that the European Union regulator and the UK regulator want advisors to be able to understand it, to be able to educate it about, and to be able to discuss that with the clients. When the clients are asking, I care about ESG, environmental, social and governance issues, I want to invest in a sustainable manner, I want to avoid certain sectors like fossil fuels, for example, so the advisors are aware and they are educated to discuss those issues with clients. I have in there some information about the market growth to give you an idea of how exciting the growth in this area is. And in a very short period of time, in the last year, when we were all at home working from home, the market, it has actually grown threefold. So the growth is really significant, very important. People are aware and they know that it's possible to invest in a sustainable manner. And also because we all invest in our pensions for the future, and your future might be different from mine, but we all want a planet that it will last for many generations, and we want our children to live in a better place. And it's all about the wealth that we have created is to protect that wealth and to grow it, and to do that in a sustainable manner, and using the sustainability as a diversifier. As you probably all know, they all say, and don't put all your eggs in the same basket. And sustainable investing it can be also give you that diversification. If you never thought about it and you're still investing in the whole economy, invested in this new growing, greener, cleaner, more efficient economy, it can be an excellent diversifier for your wealth, for your existing wealth. What I have normally experienced since I've been involved in sustainable investing is that clients returns are very important. We are saving and we are taking the risk of investing in the markets because we want some sort of returns for the next 10, 15, 20 years or 5 years, depending on everyone's time horizon. And to accomplish what our objectives are, we are saving and investing for something. So returns are very important. But more and more, they don't take precedent over what people think about representing their values in their investments, making sure that if they disagree with military and armaments around the world, or they think that tobacco is an industry that is actually a sector that is killing us and people don't want to invest in those areas, that they're able to say that they're able to discuss that with their financial advisor, with their pension provider. And both of them, investing for returns and investing to make an impact, a positive impact in the world that we live in, they have come together and people are looking for an offering that provides just that, the realization that we can make money and at the same time have a better planet and live in a better world and make a positive impact for the communities where we operate. And the financial service industry has found several ways to provide this. And you probably have heard about sustainable investing, which is my specialty and what we are going to be talking about today. You have heard about ESG, taking into consideration environmental, social, and governance issues. But normally, ESG is very much applied to any sector, any industry. So you could still invest in fossil fuels and just making sure that you invest in the best of class, the companies that are really taking into account and are mitigating their impact when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the supply chain, the workforce, when it comes to the communities that they operate, and so on. And also investment where you discuss with your advisor the areas that you don't want to invest in. And normally that is recognized as ethical investing or negative screening. Sustainable investing, on the other hand, is trying to capture most of these ideas, but very much focusing on the positive, on the areas that we actually want to invest in. And the idea that this new economy that we want to invest in, this sustainable future, making our monies work better for our planet, is very much underpinned by the idea that climate change is definitely a recognized driver of the new economy. Resource scarcity, resources are depleting, if not growing, and we need to provide more services, more products for a population that is growing faster than any other time before. Some of the growth, or most of the growth, is coming from emerging markets. So therefore, we need to keep on providing products and services. And we need to do that with a lower carbon footprint. We need to do that mindful of climate change. And interesting enough, if we look at the world in this manner, from an investment perspective, this new economy is extremely attractive because it has three components that are very important to any investors. And those are regulation, investment, and demand. And I have highlighted in my slide net zero targets, green infrastructure investing, and the new consumer. And what I mean is really that net zero targets, we are all familiar with the idea that countries around the world are working either towards 2050 or 2060 in the case of China to have net zero target emissions. So to reduce carbon emissions, so therefore we can keep the increases in temperature under control, and therefore we need to do everything with a lower carbon footprint. And if you think about what COVID has done to the economy, we were in a health and economic crisis, and governments have came out to support the crisis, to support the economy, and the green stimulus across the world, they are being invested in the digital and the green economy. Very much the understanding that the green economy provides the support for jobs and for growth. And if you today, for example, if you were listening to the news or you were listening to the budget release, you probably had spotted that the Chancellor has talked about the infrastructure bank, a bank that potentially can create 3,000 jobs by investing in green infrastructure, by investing in wind projects and solar projects. So investing in the green economy is very much the way across the world that governments are supporting the economy, and it's a great amplifier of the benefits of growing the economy. And of course, for every product and every service, we need the demand. We need that customer, that consumer asking for it. And interesting enough, most of us have been green customers or clients for a long time. Potentially, you buy in shops where you've seen that the value chain is treated properly. You identify companies that produce organic produce, or they source their clothing material for our clothes in an ethical manner. So we have been green consumers for a long time, but actually not many realize that we can also be green investor by asking, by understanding, and by actually, as Kenneth was saying, it's your money. If it's our money, we can demand how that money needs to be invested, where it has to go and where it shouldn't go. So looking at the economy as greener, cleaner, more efficient, an economy that is going to make an impact in the environment where we live in. What does actually mean from an investment point of view? What kind of sectors of the economy we are going to be investing in? What kind of companies we are going to be favoring in? When your advisor asks you, what do you mean by sustainable investment? What kind of examples we are going to be given? And it's all about, we have identified 5 investment themes: low carbon energy, food, health, resource management, and water. And it's all about providing things like solutions, companies that provide solutions to environmental and social challenges of climate change. For example, we all know that we need to move from fossil fuels to a cleaner energy, especially renewable energy. So we could invest into wind turbine producers. We could invest in the ones that connect us to the grid. When we are talking about the electrification of the car, and we could invest in the electric car, but we could also invest in the smart electronics that they go in the electric car, the ones that are going to make the connections for us to be able to plug and charge the electric car. When we look at the value chain of food, how it gets from the farm to our table, how companies are providing solutions so the food is safe to eat, the farmer has better irrigation systems so it consumes less water, how we are going to recycle the packaging where the food comes from, all of those things, all of these parts, part of the value chain. When it comes to health, very topical as we all know, companies that are providing solutions to the NHS, facilitating testing, providing testing kits, companies that are going to give us access to vaccination, access to medicine in the developing world. When it comes to resource management, not just how we treat our waste, but also how we made products and services more efficient through automation, the right automation. The one that it means that workers are going to be in a safer environment, that they have better working conditions, that they can upgrade their skills and have better jobs. When it comes to drinking water, a picture that looks so simple from the sea to the tap, and it's very complex. We need companies providing solutions to desalinate the water, to make it drinkable, connecting to the grid, the water infrastructure, smart metering, and all of those things that will make that possible. So those are the kind of companies that we are looking for when we talk about sustainable investing, looking for solution providers to the challenges of climate change. And those were the things that we normally want to invest in, and I myself, my team, and my company, we have been investing in for 20 years. But what happens when there are sectors that you want to avoid, and those are the negative screening? And in my experience, these are actually, as Kenneth was saying, you are the investor. It can be anything you want it to be. For my experience, it's very likely that it will be one or a combination of all of these sectors. I is about avoiding companies that they might be providing some solution to some issues, but perhaps they generate the lion's share of their revenue from providing solutions to the military. So we want to avoid those sectors. Or if we are favoring clean energy, we want to avoid nuclear sector, for example. We definitely want to avoid fossil fuels, so tobacco, armaments, gambling, adult content. We want to ensure that we avoid factory farming and things like that. I have come across during my experience clients that have said to me, we want to avoid investment in China. And it's not in my list because it's not that usual. And they will have their reasons. And as an investment manager, my job is to ensure that I follow the client's values in the investments that we do on their behalf. Is being accountable for that privilege of managing someone else's wealth and ensuring that we take into account what the clients want to invest in and what the clients don't want to invest in. Kenneth also mentioned he had a wheel chart about this United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And normally we say people want to make an impact with their investment. And that is quite a subjective subject. How do we measure impact? What does it mean? And how do we actually make sure that you are getting the right impact that you want? So it's very difficult to measure, but the United Nations has the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that they were created to be able to narrow the environmental and income inequalities around the world. And we have divided them in 4 different areas to give you an idea of how vast they are. And it's all about policy-related climate change. It's about how we manage natural resources. It's about how we have access to cleaner and cheap energy and water, and access to energy and water are critical to reduce income inequality and to reduce poverty. And it's all also about diversity and how we can make economic growth by having a diverse workforce and by helping minority groups around the world. So very much the Sustainable Development Goals is all about that better place where we all live, develop and developing countries. And it is very possible. So I manage a Quilter Cheviot strategy that is called the Climate Asset Strategy. And when we cross-reference the companies that we invest in, it's all about sustainable investing, those 5 investment things that we talked before. And when we cross-reference those against the Sustainable Development Goals, 11 of those goals are catered by the companies that we invest in. And in reality, that is quite high, because many of these United Nations Sustainable Goals are very much about policy, very much about climate change policy, and policy comes from governments, not from companies. So the Sustainable Development Goals, it could be something else that interests you and something else that you can discuss with your professional advisor or investor, and that you can ask them to identify funds or companies or offerings that they will cater for that. Is that something that interests you? I have some company examples of it won't be your Tesco or your Lloyds or your Prudential. Nothing fundamentally wrong with those companies, but it won't be companies from the old economy. It will be companies from the new economy, companies that are providing those solutions to the challenges of climate change, as we talked before. And I have 3 names in here. Kubota very much provided of machinery to the agriculture sector. However, a lead provider of better irrigation systems for agriculture, and agriculture is a high consumer of water. So it's very important for this water to be used in a prudent manner. So very much on the land irrigation technology. When it comes to the electric car, we know that electrification is the future. We have regulation for phasing out diesel and the combustion engine from the UK, for example, and other countries will have the same. And to get there, we need the providers to the electric car companies that are going to ensure that it's possible for us to connect the car to the electricity grid to be able to change the battery, to be able to dispose of the battery in an environmentally friendly manner, and so on. All of these companies can be listed across the world. Kubota was an example from Japan. Infineon is a German listing company. And Thermo Fisher, interesting enough, in a very topical subject, an instrumentation provider for the health sector, for research and development, for the workplace, and it has provided the testing for COVID to the NHS last year. Very much a company that did adapt during the crisis, didn't have the right value chain in the UK, and the management team reacted very, very quickly, very agile, and managed to put that in place to be able to facilitate the testing that it was so much needed. So these companies are providing solutions to issues, social issues, environmental issues, economic issues, and they are well-managed companies that they have some sort of innovation in their product line, in the offering that they have. And there are many of these type of companies out there. We have identified a universe of 1,000 companies around the world that they will provide solutions, and they will come from a combination of one or more of the themes that we invest in. And I will pass on to Doro again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm now going to pass on to Jeremy, who's fielding the questions, and I hope has probably got some of his own.
Thank you very much, Doro, and thank you, Claudia and Kenneth, for those fantastic presentations. I think we're all conscious that we can really only scratch the surface of what is an incredibly deep subject, and one which is not only very topical, but also, I think, seems to be sort of changing before our eyes. I think all people engaged in this, in this area, are impressed by how, although the subject seems to have been around for a great many years, somehow over the last year, whether that's coincidental or not, I suspect it isn't, has acquired an enormous momentum. So I'm going to look at some of the excellent questions we've had, and for the questioners, thank you very much. I will try and deal with all the subjects which have which you've brought up, but I might have to conflate one or two of the things. But actually, something which Alice Gray raises is the subject of this greenwashing. How do we distinguish between if we go out and ask questions of our institutions, how do we avoid sort of being fobbed off with something which is made to look green, which isn't really? And perhaps if I can start with, actually I'll start with Kenneth, because I know you'll both come across this, but Kenneth, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, Alice. I think that it's interesting because green is now seen as really cool and really like an attractive thing to have. So in some ways, that is progress, that you have big organizations that are actually trying to be more green than maybe they actually are, because they understand that's where the consumer base are, that's where they get their kind of like kudos and street cred, essentially. So when it comes to pension funds, we've seen a lot of kind of pension funds talk about kind of green, we've seen them talk about net zero, but when we dig a bit deeper, we actually realise they don't have any plans to do anything till 2050, and at 2050 they're going to have their fingers crossed there's a big magic event that's happened, that some new technologies come up, or they're going to plant so many trees that will cover pretty much every available bit of land on the planet. So there is a lot of kind of issues around greenwashing, and there's also lots of really good journalism about it, and really good kind of organizations that are almost designed to look into kind of greenwashing. So I'd always recommend an organization called Global Witness, who do some fantastic kind of fearless journalism, both in terms of looking at kind of finance and corporates, but about kind of environmental defenders in the Amazon and various other places. So I think that it's a kind of fascinating area. So I'd always look into that. But also, if I'd be a bit geeky about it as well. I love, like, scared enough looking at kind of sustainability reports and things, and when you have kind of one that's really good beside one that's really rubbish, actually you can really tell the difference. So always look for dates, specific things, and just make sure they're not kind of planning to wait to 2050 to do all the hard work. I mean, the best ones are lining up with Paris Agreement, which is trying to halve emissions by 2030. And then, yeah, that's the kind of things to look at. But there's some fantastic kind of journalism out there, so definitely have a look at that and just see what you think. And then if you're still a bit unsure about things, ask questions of the journalists on Twitter, or kind of have a look at through a few other organisations. There's lots of things you can do.
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. And Claudia, what's your take on this one?
Yes, it's very interesting, and I personally don't feel that there is a right and a wrong answer. And the thing is that green investing, it could mean different things to different people. So I normally say to clients, or I have colleagues that they come to me and say, "Oh, this is greenwashing, isn't it?" And I say, "Well, I don't know until we don't know what is your criteria." And we need to establish what is that criteria, and then we need to establish what that offering, what that pension fund or that portfolio is doing, and then we need to make sure that they are in line. So if your only criteria, for example, is not to invest in oil and gas, and then you're offering invest in tobacco and military, and that is green enough for you. So who am I to say that is greenwashing? However, generally speaking, when we are trying to capture all of the issues, it's all about ensuring that we differentiate between what the company does and how the company does it. Yeah. So what the company does is very much about, if we think that it is not green to invest in tobacco, gambling, and military, we definitely want to avoid those sectors. If we think that we really, really want to invest in renewable energy and water and electrification of the car, my pension should be invested in those areas. And how the company does it, it could be that the offering is all about how the company does it, and it doesn't say anywhere that it's not invested in oil and gas, or it's not investing, and it's all about identifying the best in class, the best company in the oil sector that deals with the ESG issues of the sector, the best company in the mining, the best bank, and therefore that might be green enough for people that only care about how the company does it. So it's quite complex, but my advice on my underlying message is that you own your monies, and you also need to take some responsibility, and the responsibility is read the small print. It's like any product, like anything we buy, read the small print, and the small print will tell you what that manager is going to do and what is not going to do. So that's what it is, understanding what we buy into, and that's it. And does it really match what we want?
So we've got to do some thinking for ourselves. That's always a very alarming answer. I'm now going to take a look at a question which is raised by Diane, but I think Hugo also touches on it, and it's really a question of sequestering carbon underground and reforestation are both solutions in some way or other to decarbonisation, and so would be getting panels, solar panels, but solar panels require rare earths to manufacture them. There are lots of very complicated questions and trade-offs in this area, and going back to you, Kenneth, how do you think that people should try and make up their minds about, well, should we be concentrating on sequestering carbon or reforestation, or it's all very difficult.
Yes, it is, yeah, and I think that it's always kind of important to remember that we are living in a society and a system that values kind of the use of items to create other items, and there's always going to be consumption, and there's always going to be products that go to waste and all of these things. So much kind of wind turbines and things, they do use rare earths. I mean, I think it's a really good example, for instance, to use electric cars, because they do use rare earths. So for those who don't know, rare earths are materials that are difficult to extract from the kind of earth. So you have kind of bauxite and things in Myanmar. So you've got these kind of like areas that are difficult to regulate in terms of workers' rights that are required for these kind of items, but there are also kind of like different developing ways to improve the kind of extraction of these things and try to make sure they're done in a more ethical way. But I think I read a report the other day that electric cars, while they do use rare earths, still are 300 times, petrol cars are 300 times more energy inefficient and resource inefficient than electric cars. So you still have one electric car essentially is one petrol car is worth 300 electric cars in terms of the resources required to create it. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. So while the electric car does require certain resources, it's actually still significantly more efficient than the kind of internal combustion. But also I think in terms of reforestation, it's an interesting one because a lot of kind of like, it goes back to Alice's question about greenwashing. A lot of kind of organizations say we're going to continue business as usual and just burn lots of oil, get lots of gas in the go, but we're going to plant lots of forests and that'll make it better. So that isn't the way to do it often, because these forests are not where those particular trees have ever grown before. They're not actually developed to actually help the wildlife in the local area and things. So there's lots of kind of problems with just like making lots of trees and hoping that'll go away. So I think that's where, as an organization and the kind of green movement is hoping to try to work with organizations to find real ways to cut their emissions and not just have things that are just built to try and cover up the problem.
Yeah, great. And Claudia, how do you sort out the sheep from the goats in this area?
Yes, it's a challenging work, and I think that we are in the journey. It's the journey to understand that the electric car, as Kenny was mentioning as an example that everybody will understand, is imperfect. The electric car doesn't is zero emissions, but how we have constructed electric cars, the materials, the processes involved, they had emissions, and the whole life cycle is a net zero. And that's why we need the regulation, we need the government support, we need the guidance, and we need companies doing the research that is involved in identifying alternative materials that they are not fossil fuel based. You need to remember that these are hundreds of years of a fossil fuel based economy that we are trying to change by 2050. So it's a lot of work, and we need to come to the realization that it will be a hybrid world where fossil fuels still exist, and we are just trying to reduce fossil fuels and increase the share of renewables and reducing emission by changing that dynamic.
That's a great answer. I want to use it. It makes me think, especially with the budget today and the climate conference coming up in Glasgow, and again I'll ask this of you, Kenneth, first. I mean, in this country at institutional level, and perhaps we as consumers and financially involved people, because anyone with a pension or savings is financially involved, do we have enough sense of urgency? If we read different sources in the press, we would get very different views on that. I mean, you're a campaigner. What do you think?
So it's a good question. It's a really funny thing, because the UK is very, very critical of itself, and rightly critical. It's good to be critical about what we're doing to kind of look into things to try and make them better. But actually, the UK internationally is seen as a bit of a leader on climate change and a bit of a leader on kind of investing in the kind of the right kind of climate products and things. And it's just fascinating, because a lot of people in the climate space, when they're doing domestic work, they will campaign hard and push hard, but when they go to international events or conferences, they'll actually get pats on the back from people in different countries. And the UK is actually pretty good at this. So I think that it's positive, and I think that COP26, this climate change coming up, the climate change conference coming from Glasgow, is a really good opportunity for the UK to make that leadership count. and there have been some kind of good signs coming up. So Alok Sharma, the minister in charge of the COP preparations, has recently been given permission to leave his business portfolio aside so he can just focus on this as a conference. And this is a huge moment. And Boris Johnson recently announced some very good kind of like plans at the adaptation summit a few weeks ago, and there's a kind of G7 event happening in Cornwall where we're hoping to see more climate change announcements happening. So there is a lot of kind of positive moves and positive actions, but then at the same time the government's also invested in a coal kind of mine in Cumbria, so there's always kind of like positives and negatives, but I think it is important. And if people are kind of like interested, definitely kind of talk to your MP about it, try to make sure they've got it on their radar, they're pushing government, because there's a lot more we can do and should do. And yeah, it's quite an urgent moment. So while we are good as a country, there's a lot more we could do to be better.
But the more we as members of the public engage, whether that's as investors or as people who have MPs who respond to their mailbags, the more that we as a nation can sort of do better. And Claudia, I mean, you must have colleagues from all the major countries in the world. I mean, how do you feel the UK is viewed on this?
I think that Kenneth is right, and we are a leader, and we have been setting pace. However, when it comes to this year climate change accord, I think that we are probably going to be overshadowed by the realization that the US has rejoined, and Biden is definitely a supporter of climate change. So it's going to be that kind of friendly competition between the Americas taking the spotlight and us being the organizers and underpinning these conversations. But I think that is a fantastic opportunity for the UK to demonstrate the leadership in that area, and if anything, to collaborate with all of the nations involved. And we need that regulation. It is part of human nature. Without regulations, things don't get done. Well, let's develop the regulation, establish it, and make sure that we have the targets and that we enforce it. And I think that is all. It should all come together this year. We should all, everything should come together for this to be able to get us there. 2050 sounds like it's far on the future, but actually it's all the landmarks to get to 2050. And this year is going to be the underpinning by the US and the UK, particularly by the US rejoining the group.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. And just going back to the floor, I think Alice raises a question about which is perhaps something we all need to think about, which is if we don't have a very large amount of money, is it better to concentrate on our actions as consumers rather than perhaps investors? She raises the example, perhaps she'd be better spending her money greening up her home than investing. But is there a conflict? In order to avoid the 1-2-1-2, I'll let Claudia, I'll let you comment on that first.
Yes, there are many ways we can make an impact in the world that we live in, and we as consumers have actually driven the need of having sustainable investment, driven the need of advisors knowing about the space, driven the need for pensions to invest in a kind of greener manner. So we are very, very important as consumers. Demand is critical to generate any change, and there isn't. And when it comes to is our pension large enough to make a difference? Potentially not, but every little helps, and no pun intended. Every little helps, and when we all collectively, all our pensions are making change, and we are pushing for that, we will make that change, and we will make that impact as a community rather than as an individual. So yes, as consumers, as investors, we can make an impact.
Yeah, and Kenneth, I know you engage with people at every level, as consumers as well as investors. But what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that, I completely agree. I think that where our money goes, the market will follow, and the kind of other products will follow. So that's a kind of a great quote from someone called Christiana Figueres, who used to be in charge of the United Nations climate change side of things. And it's a properly fantastic moment where we're seeing more and more products and more items come up that are environmentally friendly, that are green. So I think that if you can be conscious in your kind of life choices about what you purchase, you are helping contribute to the green economy. Also, I would say in terms of kind of like greening your home is actually a hugely important thing. I used to work for a housing charity, and we'd kind of done a lot of investigations into it, and so many homes are actually really bad in terms of giving off emissions and not allowing kind of heat preservation and things like that. So it's definitely a good thing to do as well. I won't go too off topic, but I would definitely recommend doing that.
Great. Now this is on the more sobering side, and I'll stick with you, Kenneth, on this. But relatively briefly, the climate targets are clearly very ambitious, and a point has been made that this country is still very behind, and basically so is everyone else. I mean, should we just throw our hands up in despair?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, and hopefully this is going to be the last question, because that'll be a bit of a certain note to end on. But I think that a lot of countries are making a lot of progress, and I hate to kind of like trumpet Scotland because I'm from there, but Scotland is one of those countries that actually is kind of doing a fantastic job at cutting emissions and kind of helping develop the technologies that will allow the cutting of emissions to be easier for both them, but also for kind of other countries in the world. I think that most countries are behind, but in all honesty, there's not been a huge disincentive to fall behind at the moment. I think this is probably kind of one of the problems, and don't want to necessarily go into the kind of like international climate negotiation sphere too much, but there are kind of discussions about whether carbon cuts should be mandatory, whether it should be voluntary. There's always this discussion, and I think that with the Biden administration on the right side, who are really pushing for climate cuts and trying to be out there, I think the kind of Biden administration and John Kerry are looking at how they are going to tackle climate finance specifically. I think with their leadership, with the UK, as we said previously, kind of almost having this friendly competition with them, there is a lot of hope, but we'll find out in November the 6th to the 17th or whenever the kind of COP conference is. But yeah, I think there is hope with the Biden administration, but there's a whole lot of work to do.
Yeah, thanks. And Claudia, brief word on this one.
Yes, I was kind of thinking, well, if there is a will, there is a way. And I think that COVID has demonstrated that. Initially, it was unthinkable that a year later we would have 50 million plus people vaccinated. And I think that that is what we're trying to achieve with the Paris Agreement, the climate change agreement, bringing all the governments together and making sure that together we get to these challenging targets. And I believe that Biden, he mean it. And of course, he needs to sort it out, COVID in the US firstly, but it's part of the agenda and it's very strong. So if anything, we are in a much better position than we were 2 years ago. So it's looking more possible, it's looking more achievable.
Great, thank you. And maybe just probably we need to wrap up pretty soon, but Stephen has expressed the thought that in this, what we're doing now, we're trying at least to link values and economics in a particular way. And although, you know, as far as this little evening is concerned, we're small in number. Can you say something about how you feel the link between economics and values has developed, perhaps over the last few years since you've been a fund manager?
Yes, so I started my career like 20 years ago, and the issue that we had, it was that it was very difficult to generate those returns that people needed. The universe, the companies, they weren't there, and that has evolved. And that has helped us to be able to demonstrate that there is a way to do it. There are many offerings in the market. Our particular offering, we have been managing this climate asset fund for 11 years. And consistently, we got our performance against the benchmark or the peer group, or positive returns better than people would have got elsewhere. And that gives people the confidence and the comfort that if it's something that they are just tipping in, that they don't understand it, that if they are going to generate the same or equal returns, why wouldn't they do it if it's something good to do? So that's what it is. It's all about feeling comfortable with a new way of investing, with a new way of identifying the winners of the next 10, 20 years. And that's what I think that the title of today evening is so appropriate, is investing for the future. And the future is going to look different to what it did look 20 years ago. And the future for our children is going to look different from what it looks today. But we are in that journey. And I think that that's the difference, that to be in that journey, now the investment opportunities are out there. It's not a challenge. It's no longer a challenge. It is possible.
That's an encouraging thought. And Kenneth, I'd like to you to make a quick comment on this, and then I'll hand back to Doro, because I think she probably might want to ask something too.
Yes, of course, definitely. And yes, I think it's really fascinating time we're living in, and it's interesting kind of talking to pension funds. They're so, first of all, they're like confused that people actually care about their pension and want to change it. But also when they realize that, they actually realize the benefits to moving and making people's pensions more environmentally friendly, and also engaging people on it. So we've done some kind of work with a lot of kind of pension funds, and we've done some of the kind of public analysis and things. And we've kind of found that over half of the people, when they realize their pensions invested in products, over half want to be kind of more environmentally, 67% of people want to be more environmentally friendly. Over half will actually save more money if their money is doing good, if they're actually happy with what their money is doing. And that rises to about 70% of young people. So pension funds are realizing, actually, this is a really good way to get people more interested. It's a good way to get people saving more money. And it's also really good because we can then invest in really good products, which will help the kind of SDGs, will help the future. And the government are realizing this as well. And there's some kind of like legislation coming through. They're trying to be better and make pension funds work harder at that. So I think this connecting between our values and our money is really actually going to change the world. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but genuinely we're already seeing kind of tangible impacts. And yeah, as Claudia said, there's so many more products and things that are available. So yeah, we live in definitely kind of positive times, and I'd always encourage everyone to have a look at their pension, look at their investments, and try to be part of that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. And Doro, I want to give the hand back to you to give you the last word and do your wrap. And as we always
thank
feel,
you. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been really, really interesting, you know, to hear about how, I mean, it seems to be that we're now talking about how green we should be, not whether we should be green or not. You know, that it feels like the whole thing has just moved, doesn't it? And you know, I can remember, you know, 10 years ago or something, this was something which people really didn't talk about very much. And now, you know, as Claudia said, the market has expanded tremendously. And I think this has been a great way of getting us all to think more about the ways that we can engage. And that's what you're suggesting we should do, ask questions and really look into where our money is, which is fantastic. And Jeremy, fantastic to have you there asking the questions. It's been really good. A reminder that the Primrose Hill Community Association always likes donations. And also to say that we have done like a resources list to go out to panelists. And if Claudia and Kenneth have got any other suggestions of things to put on it, I'll send it round to them, and we'll get it out to you, to all of you within the week. And thank you very much. The next, our next view from the hill is about biodiversity in gardens. And growing places within Primrose Hill and how we can make our area more biodiverse. And that's in 2 weeks' time on the 17th. So I hope we'll see some of the same names there then. Thank you very, very much. Thanks.